In 2006, a modern combine harvester stopped in the middle of a field. No warning. No clear reason. It just shut down. 84 acres of wheat, fully ripe, ready to harvest. And less than 2 days before the weather turned. The forecast was clear. A major storm was coming. If the crop wasn't taken off in time, it could all be lost. The owner of the farm, Daniel Reeves, stood at the edge of the field, saying nothing, doing nothing, just watching, as the wheat moved with the wind. Every minute that passed wasn't just time. It was risk. It was money. The machine had been checked. Every system, every line, every obvious point of failure. Nothing was wrong. And yet, it wouldn't run. They called the first technician, then a second, then another. 3 men, more than 40 years of experience between them. And still, no answer. The second day passed. The field was still standing. The machine was still silent. And the storm was getting closer. Late that afternoon, just as things were turning from concern to desperation, an old pickup truck pulled up along the edge of the field. No one had called him. No one was expecting anyone else. The man who stepped out was in his 60s, wearing a worn jacket, hands rough, like they had been shaped by years of work. He didn't speak at first. He just watched the machine, watched the men working on it, then looked out across the field. One of the technicians turned toward him, slightly annoyed. "We've got it handled." The man nodded, didn't argue. He stepped closer, took a few seconds to look more carefully, then said, "I think I know what's wrong." No one responded right away. Then one of them laughed. Not a quiet laugh. The kind you make when you're certain someone doesn't understand the situation. Because standing in front of them were 3 trained professionals. And behind them was an old man with a worn-out truck. But he didn't react, didn't defend himself, didn't explain. He just waited for the laughter to pass. Then added, "It's a small part. Shouldn't cost more than $17. At that moment, no one believed him. No one listened. No one realized that $17 was about to decide the entire harvest. No one moved. Not toward the machine. Not toward him. The technicians exchanged a look. The kind of look that doesn't need words. One of them shrugged. "Go ahead," he said. Half a joke, half a challenge. The old man nodded. Stepped closer to the combine. He didn't open a manual, didn't ask questions. He placed his hand on the side panel, as if he was feeling something through it. Then he listened. Not to the engine. To the silence. A few seconds passed. Then a few more. To everyone else, it looked like nothing. But to him, something didn't line up. He reached down, tapped a small section near the lower housing, then turned back. "There's a blockage," he said. "Fuel's not feeding right." One of the technicians shook his head. "We checked the lines." The old man nodded again. "I know." He pointed, not to the main line, but to a smaller connection. "Not there," he said quietly. "There." They hesitated. Not because it was complicated, because it was too simple. One of them bent down anyway, more out of curiosity than belief. He loosened the fitting. Waited. Nothing. A slow drip. Not pressure, not flow. Just resistance. The technician frowned, looked closer. Something inside the line was partially blocked. Not enough to stop everything, but enough to keep it from running right. He stood up slowly, didn't say anything at first. Then glanced at the others. "Hand me a wrench." The laughter was gone. Replaced by something quieter. Focus. They removed the section. Cleared it, reassembled it. No rush now, no jokes. Just work. When it was done, one of them climbed into the cab. Turned the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the engine turned. Once. Twice. And then, it caught. The sound filled the field, loud, steady, alive. No one spoke. They just stood there, listening. The same machine. The same system. Now working. One of the technicians climbed down, wiped his hands. "How did you know?" The old man didn't answer right away. He looked at the combine, then at the field, then back at them. "I've seen it before." That was all he said. No explanation, no details, just experience. Daniel Reeves stood there, watching everything. The machine running, the technicians silent. And the old man, already turning back toward his truck. "Wait," Daniel called out. The man stopped. "How much do I owe you?" The old man thought for a moment, then said, $17. Daniel blinked, not because of the price, because of what it meant. $17, against 84 acres, against a storm, against everything that could have been lost. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the money. The old man took it, nodded once, and left. No name, no business card, no explanation, just a fixed machine, and a field that still had a chance. The machine didn't stop again. Not that day. Not the next. It ran. Steady. Consistent. Like it had never failed at all. Daniel didn't wait. He climbed into the cab before the sound even settled. Because now, every hour mattered. The first pass cut clean. Wheat falling in a perfect line. Grain moving through the system without hesitation. For the first time in 2 days, everything felt normal. But the pressure didn't go away. It just changed. Now it wasn't about fixing the problem. It was about beating the clock. The storm was still coming. And the window was still closing. Daniel ran the combine from sunrise to well past dark. Headlights cutting across the field. Dust hanging in the air. The machine didn't hesitate. Didn't slow. And neither did he. By the end of the first full day, nearly half the field was down. More than he thought was possible. More than he had hoped for. But still not enough. The second day pushed harder. Longer hours. Less rest. Because the sky had started to change. Clouds building in the distance. Air growing heavier. The kind of pressure you don't measure. You feel. Every pass across the field was a race. Every row left standing was a risk. By late afternoon, only a small section remained. Not enough to relax. Just enough to worry. The wind picked up. Subtle at first, then steady. Daniel didn't stop. Didn't look back. He kept moving. Row after row. Until the last stretch stood in front of him. Golden. Waiting. He took a breath. Then drove straight through it. The final pass ended just as the first drop hit the windshield. Light at first. Then heavier. By the time he turned the machine toward the edge of the field, the rain was coming down hard. The kind of rain that would have ruined everything if it had come a few hours earlier. Daniel shut off the engine. Sat there for a moment, listening to the sound of rain hitting metal. Watching the field he had just cleared. Every acre. Every row. Safe. He didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. He just sat there, understanding what had almost happened. Because without that moment, without that one small fix, none of this would exist. Passed overnight. But the impact stayed. At the co-op the next morning, people were already talking. Not about the storm. About the machine. 3 technicians couldn't fix it. Old guy shows up and solves it in minutes. $17. They repeated the number. Like it didn't make sense. Because it didn't. Not compared to what was at stake. And not compared to what had been saved. Daniel heard it all. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't add to the story. Because he knew they weren't really talking about the machine. They were talking about something else. Something harder to explain. And harder to accept. That's sometimes the difference between losing everything and saving it all comes down to something most people don't even notice. Something small. Something simple. Something that doesn't look important until it is. The story didn't stay in the field. It moved. From one farmer to another. From the co-op to the feed store. From a conversation to a version of the truth people wanted to tell. 3 technicians couldn't fix it. Old man walks in, finds it in minutes. $17. The details stayed the same, but the meaning started to change. Some told it like a joke, others like a warning. But everyone agreed on one thing: it didn't make sense. Because it challenged something they trusted, something they depended on. Training. Systems. The idea that if something was complex, it required a complex solution. Daniel didn't argue with any of it. He went back to work. Because the harvest wasn't finished when the machine started. It was finished when the grain was sold. Days later, the numbers came in. 84 acres. Full yield. No loss from the storm. On paper, it looked like a normal season. But it wasn't. Because one moment had almost erased all of it. And one decision had saved it. The technicians didn't come back. They didn't need to. They had done their job. They had followed the process. And the process had failed. That wasn't their fault. It was just incomplete. What the old man had wasn't in a manual. It wasn't written down. It wasn't something you could learn in a week, or even a year. It was something built over time. Piece by piece, problem by problem. Until patterns formed. Until small details meant something. Until a machine that looked silent actually said everything you needed to hear. A week later, Daniel saw the same truck again. On the same road. He pulled over this time, stepped out. The old man did the same. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked, "How did you see it?" The old man leaned against his truck. Thought about it. "Same way you see a storm coming," he said. "You don't always see it directly. You see what changes before it gets there." Daniel nodded slowly. Because that made sense. "You ever fix machines for a living?" he asked. The old man shook his head. "No." "Then how?" "I farm," the man said. That was it. No title, no explanation. Just experience, applied in a way most people had forgotten. Before Daniel could ask anything else, the old man stepped back into his truck. Engine started, gravel shifted under the tires. And just like that, he was gone again. No name, no number. No way to find him. Only the result he left behind, and a question that didn't go away. What else? Were people missing, because they were looking too hard for something complicated? Weeks passed. The harvest was finished. The grain was sold. On paper, it looked like a normal season. But Daniel knew better. Because normal seasons don't come that close to disappearing, and they don't get saved by something that small. $17. A single part, a few minutes of attention, against everything that was at risk. He went back to the machine a few days later, not because it needed fixing, because he wanted to understand. He opened the panel. Looked at the line, the connection, the place where everything had gone wrong. It didn't look like much. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Just a small restriction. Easy to miss. Unless you knew what you were looking for. Daniel closed the panel, stepped back. And realized something he hadn't thought about before. The problem wasn't hidden. It wasn't buried deep inside the machine, it was right there. Visible. Accessible. The difference wasn't where it was how it was seen. At the co-op, the story kept growing. People repeated it, each time a little sharper. 3 technicians missed it. Old farmer saw it instantly. $17 saved everything. Some said it like a lesson. Others like a warning. But no one argued with the outcome. Because the outcome was real. The field was harvested. The loss never happened. Daniel didn't correct the story. Didn't simplify it. Didn't exaggerate it. He let people say what they wanted. Because what mattered wasn't how it sounded. It was what it meant. Months later, someone asked him what made the difference, not the part. Not the timing. The moment itself. Daniel thought about it, then gave the only answer that felt true. It wasn't the fix, he said. It was knowing where to look. He paused, then added, and knowing what to ignore. Because that was the part most people missed. They looked at everything. Every system. Every possibility. And in doing that, they lost the ability to see the one thing that mattered. The old man hadn't looked everywhere, he had looked exactly where it counted. And that made all the difference. Out in the field, the machine stood quiet again. Waiting for the next season. Ready, working. Nothing had ever gone wrong. But Daniel would never see it the same way again. Because now he understood that sometimes the biggest problems don't need bigger solutions. They need someone who knows how to see what everyone else overlooks.